Welcome to another great panel on our CMMC journey. Today, we're going to talk to solutions providers. It's going to be a really neat panel because we're going to explore what these companies do, what these people do, and how they can help you on your CMMC journey. As you know by now, this is brought to you by the Georgia Defense Industrial Base Task Force, which is a kind of a group of like-minded companies, organizations, and individuals spearheaded by the Georgia Department of Economic Development, the Technology Association of Georgia, the Cyber Center, and some other interested parties. Again, thank you so much for being here. We've got 4 great panelists that I think you will really enjoy. As I said, my name, I was a little remiss, I'm Roy Hadley. I am on the Georgia Defense Industrial Base Task Force, and I'm also a lawyer, cybersecurity technology lawyer at the law firm of Adams and Reese. So with all that said, let's get to it. I'm going to introduce our panelists. I'll introduce you, and then we'll go back and I'll ask you each to tell me a little bit more about what you do, who you are, and kind of give people the reason why you're here today. So first up, we have Horacio Maysonet. He's the president and CEO of Cybersecurity Solutions. We also have Chris Silver, who today is now going to be known as Chris S., and you'll see why in a second. He is an AB registered practitioner, an RP, and does consulting in the cybersecurity CMMC space. And so we'll learn a lot from Chris. We also have Chris H. Now you know why Chris S is Chris S. And Chris H is Chris Hallenbeck. He's the CIO of Tanium. And Tanium, he will explain kind of what they do. So excited to have Chris H here. And last but certainly not least, we have Ron Tallwalker. And Ron, if I'm saying that incorrectly, please correct me. He's the director of cyber intelligence and solutions for MasterCard. Really, just a great panel. We're going to learn a lot today. And these 4 are going to give you a lot of insight about how you can get help from people, solutions providers, to help you on your CMMC journey, no matter where you are in that journey, whether you're just starting in the journey or whether you're well along, whether you're stuck and need some help. So with that, I'm going to ask Ron to, last to be introduced, but first to tell us a little bit more about you, what you do at MasterCard, and we're not going to get too deep into the solutions that you provide yet, but just kind of tell us what you do and kind of what MasterCard's interest is in this CMMC journey. So Ron?
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Roy. And thanks for having me part of the panel. And great to have with some great people, other panelists on here as well. So a little bit about myself, just to expand on that. I've been in cybersecurity for about 16, 17 years now. Wow. Running primarily product management, commercial products for the last 10 to 12 years, focusing on endpoint security, threat intelligence, cloud security. Here at MasterCard, I focus on capability that is focused really on third-party risk management. Really an important space, as we all know, with a lot of the recent breaches and attacks, really targeting your weakest links. So as Director of Product Management, I'm focused on driving some of the capabilities across some of the MasterCard portfolio products. I was at companies like McAfee for about 16 years running endpoint security. I worked at Silence, which was sort of the first company to really do AI in cybersecurity space, at least do it right. And so was on a journey for about 6 years doing startups, everything from threat intelligence to endpoint security. And then again at McAfee for about 16 years running their endpoint business. Before that, I worked at Intel Corporation for about 12 years and ran various types of embedded products from gigabit switches and hubs to routers. So I've had the luxury, I would say, of being at the largest companies to medium size to startups, which is culturally very different, right? And then kind of peppering that with cybersecurity I've seen a lot of it, right? And you know, I'm really interested in the space of standards, right? CMMC, NIST, FSMA. Our world is really driven, especially in the government space, around our ability to meet those criteria, not just only for our own hygiene, but those we do business with, because there's an expectation if you're entering RFPs or RFIs that you must meet this certain qualification, even to be a candidate for a particular RFP. And I think those are the staples. That's what's really I see driving a lot of the industry today is certifications. And so it's very interesting to me. And I'm happy to be here and hopefully can provide a little bit of background on some of my experience.
Fantastic, thanks. Look forward to really pushing you a little bit today and learning a lot. Chris S., Mr. Silver, tell us a little bit about you. I know you're an RP and you know, tell us a little bit about that, how you got there and what that means.
Sure, absolutely. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. So thanks, Roy. Definitely happy to be here. And by the way, there is an S on the end of my name. It's very common.
Silvers, my apologies.
Yes, I'm plural, I guess, right? But anyway, good to meet everybody. And Ron, you and I have some similar background. I was at McAfee for a little while, just before they were bought by Intel, and so was an Intel employee as well. And that's really where I cut my teeth in consulting, was with a division of McAfee called Foundstone. Joined there back in 2008, and you know, not too many people remember the Foundstone guys, but one of the reasons I went with Foundstone was they had an educational department, and so I've been very heavily into security education. So I'm probably best known in the industry for a certain specialty in security called social engineering. Okay. I had the opportunity to compete in a social engineering capture the flag contest at a little conference out in Vegas called DEF CON. Fortunate enough to win that and get a black badge. So free admission to DEF CON, right? But so other than social engineering, CG Silvers Consulting, which is a small firm just headed by myself. In addition to social engineering, we do traditional penetration testing and incident response and security education, as I mentioned. But one of the growing areas now, after 23 years in this industry, I've really started focusing more on risk and compliance, right? Because as Ron said, that's kind of where this industry is headed, right? I think we've discovered that pounding our fist on the table and saying you need to be secure isn't working. Right. Businesses need more motivation to do that. So in terms of CMMC, I think I started studying it about a year and a half ago. So probably around December of 2019, when it first kind of was getting some traction. And so in addition to being a registered practitioner, I also am kind of in the process, or kind of, I guess, in the home stretch of becoming a certified third-party assessment organization, so a C3PAO. And then also, I'm becoming a provisional instructor, which means also being a provisional assessor in June. I'm completing that coursework in early June. So kind of involved in three different ways with CMMC. Definitely making a big bet on it. A few things that are unique about CMMC with the flow down rule, which I think is going to mean that a lot of small businesses, and that's kind of my focus, a lot of small businesses are going to be roped into this, and they're just not going to be ready at all. So they're going to need a lot of help. So, there's going to be plenty of work to do. Yeah.
Well, that's what we're here for. And it's funny, Chris, I can see that educational bend in your background coming back into play, becoming an instructor and all of that. So good stuff. And we're going to circle back around to you, especially on that C3PAO piece, and really kind of help our audience understand what that is and how that might help them. So I'm going to jump to Horacio now and let you tell us a little bit about cybersecurity solutions and what you do there and what the company does.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And hello, everyone. It's an honor to be here in this panel. Cybersecurity Solutions, it's a company that specializes in, I would like to say, is we bring the orchestra when it comes to in the CMMC market. And that is that we are not a company that sells a music instrument. We bring the orchestra, we bring the tools, we bring policies, we bring training pieces, and help really small and medium organizations that don't have the staffing, that lack the knowledge, that don't have the guidance, really walk with them and get them up to ready. That the compliance piece will be a C3PAO opportunity for them to do that. We cannot do that as somebody that's been walking with them and providing services. And what we do is we provide all the incident response and monitoring side of the house. So we bring everything from the technology to the policies, the procedures, the training, and then we monitor the networks. We sit there through, we're going to be sitting through the C3PAO assessments. So we really help the small and medium organizations not have to deal with what's currently in the market of having to pay $10,000, $12,000 to an organization for a gap assessment, having to invest $30,000 on technology that they have to integrate, spending another $20,000 on engineering for somebody to configure that, and then paying another monthly fee to somebody that can monitor it. We simplify the process. We're able to execute. We're able to get everything established within 90 days. And from there is a journey, because CMMC has made it clear that this is a cultural change that has to happen in your organization. So we help from 0 to 100 and in between. And that's really what we're doing in CMMC space. We do a lot of other areas and a lot of other frameworks and compliances. We do HIPAA, we do SOC work, but specifically for today, I wanted to focus on our CMMC. We're headquarters in Tampa, Florida. We have offices and staff in the Georgia Cyber Center. So we're here. We have office in Washington, DC also, and we've been around since 2015. So I'm excited to be here and be able to share with you guys what we've seen in this journey in preparing small and medium businesses.
Fantastic. And just so you know, Horacio, if you say HIPAA one more time, I'm gonna start twitching. I was twitching when you said that. My eyes started twitching, and all of a sudden it kind of went down into my legs. So we're not gonna say HIPAA anymore, even though I do a lot of stuff.
We won't say the H word. We won't say the H word.
Right, right. You know, and we don't want anybody in the audience twitching either. So last but certainly not least, Mr. Hellenbeck, you know, tell us a little bit about what you do. You're the CIO at
CISO, actually.
Oh, CISO. Okay.
Yep.
See, I got the notes here, you know. So you're the CISO at Tanium. And tell us a little bit about Tanium and what you all do there.
Sure. Well, we're a software platform for endpoint management and security. So bringing both the IT operations and security components together in a single platform for those teams to work together from a common source of data. We started out in some of the largest organizations in the world, from banks to all of the branches of the US DoD. Our deployments, some of our largest deployments are to over 1 million endpoints in a single organization. And we're able to do that at that level of scale with a single server instance. There's a second one for high availability, but in terms of scaling it, we can handle very, very large environments. So that's where we started, and we've progressively gone into mid-markets, mid-sized organizations as well, because even they have complex IT operations and security challenges. So giving them that visibility in seconds to be able to query all of those endpoints, get answers back, and then importantly, start to make business decisions based on that information.
Okay, gotcha, fantastic. All right, so we're covering the spectrum here today, which is fantastic. So my first question up, and I'll call on somebody, kind of like the teacher, you know, you look and we'll do the Socratic method here. I'll call on somebody, but what I would say to everybody is feel free to add to it. Feel free to give a contrary point of view or add to it and beef it up a little bit if you think of something. So really the first question is, because you're all providers, you're solutions providers. If I am a company, and let's just say I'm small to mid-size just to start this conversation, and I somehow missed all the emails, I missed all the things about CMMC, or I selectively chose to ignore them, kind of like my children sometimes say I selectively choose to ignore their text messages to me or their emails to me. So let's say I selectively ignored all the CMMC, and I realized, oh my goodness, I've got to do something. You know, and just for the sake of conversation, let's say this person or this company is probably going to be a level 3. You know, level 1 is just basic. Everybody kind of has to do that cybersecurity culture change. But let's say they're level 3. What would be the thing you would say to them to start their journey? And you know, I'll start with you, Mr. Silvers. You know, because you for no other reason that I'm going to start with you. But you know, kind of what would you tell them to do? You know, where would you say to start that journey for them in terms of CMMC compliance, particularly say level 3?
Sure. So, well, I would suggest, first of all, backing up half a step. And yeah, Chris is nodding his head. He knows where I'm headed.
Yeah.
Confirm that level 3 is required, right? My favorite answer to any compliance question, no matter if it's the H word or PCI or whatever, right?
I'm twitching.
My favorite answer is not applicable, right? Because it just makes your life easier. So,
Gotcha.
So anytime I get in a conversation with any company who's talking about CMMC, is I really probe into the business processes and ask the vital question: do you really have to create, possess, transfer, process CUI? Do you have to? Not are you? Sure, maybe you are right now, but do you have to? Could you change your business processes to where you don't actually have to possess or create CUI? By pushing that to your prime contractor or whoever is requiring you to be CMMC compliant, pushing to them and say, well, can we just get read access to the CUI instead of actually possessing it ourselves? Because if so, that could bump you down to level 1. Now you're at what, 17 practices, no processes. It's so much easier, right? So that would be my first. That may not be what you're expecting, but that would be my avoidance, right?
Right. No, that's a great start, because again, you just have to say, is it applicable? And just, you know, just to make sure we're all on the same page, when you say CUI, just, you know, kind of tell us what your thoughts are around CUI. And then, you know, I saw you, Ron, nodding a little bit, so we'll come to you and ask you about that next.
Yeah, so CUI is controlled unclassified information. Essentially, formally defined as any information that is protected by a DoD related regulation or law. It's very kind of a vague definition. There's a whole catalog of what is defined as CUI. But when it really comes right down to it, for a small, medium-sized company, you don't need to worry about that. What you need to worry about is your customer is telling you you have to be CMMC certified. They need to specify why, and you need to ask them why, because you're handling CUI. Okay, tell me the CUI that I'm handling, and how can I avoid handling it or creating it or storing it, right? You don't have to, dig in and debate them. Just ask the question, right? And that's because the accreditation board is predicting that 80 to 90% of the defense supply chain, which is actually bigger than the DIB, by the way, 80 to 90% should be at level 1.
Okay.
Well, I'll tell you, I've worked with 30 different companies so far, and only one of them has been level 1.
Right.
So
Right.
there's a disconnect there, and I
Right.
think
Right.
that's the first step.
Yeah,
Okay.
the game anytime when you're dealing with government certification processes, I spent 7 years at DHS de-scoping. If you can de-scope whatever you're doing
Yeah.
to the smallest thing possible,
Right.
even if you can't as an organization get away from handling CUI, if you can make it just a few people or a few systems
Right.
and get it just in that little enclave, you'll
Yep.
simplify your life overall.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. That's step number 2 is to reduce scope, right? First applicability, second is scope, create an enclave.
And then a real honest assessment of where you are today versus where you think you are.
Sure.
Gotcha.
So
Gotcha.
I would like to add a little bit on this really quick. So we've worked with about 300, currently working with about 300 small, medium, and by that I mean less than 500 endpoints. Considered small, right? Small, medium organizations, and across multiple states. One of the biggest challenges is that the government is not necessarily, they don't even know what CUI is, and they're not even telling these manufacturers or these companies. So I've seen drawings of parts of the F-35 wing, and when I look at it, for those parts, at the top and at the bottom, there is no label of classifications, and they're trying to tell me I need a level 1. I don't need a level 3. I'm seeing blueprints right here on your computer. That's what you take and you put on your machines to cut the metals and bend it and all those things to specifications. So a lot of the stuff, now the government is investing in getting those answers. Because I want to start there, because what I hear the most is a frustration from the manufacturers of, look, I don't even know if I have CUI. And when I ask my prime doesn't even know what to tell me. A lot of the times they also edit pictures and drawings before it comes out, and they leave those parts out. So I don't even know if it would have been labeled to it. So the challenge is, it's definitely going back to the prime, but setting yourself up to make sure that you're going to be compliant and you're going to be ready, and use some common sense on some of those areas on how do we determine what CUI and parts and degrees of a bent of a wing that's supposed to handle that stress. It's going to be something that is sensitive, right? There's something that in the wrong hands can give a very different perspective of what our military gear is. So without even the markings on it, you can kind of tell. And the end goal of this is to keep our war fighters safe, right? We want to make sure that when our soldiers and our men and women in the military go into battle, that their systems are not already exploited to the point that our adversary knows exactly how they're going to defeat them. Right. So we have to take this seriously. And yes, doing the minimum just to meet a compliance is fine. But if you're truly secure, they can put a level 10 on you that doesn't even exist, and you'll be fine because you're doing business the proper way to do it. Don't just look at the bottom line, also look at the lives that are tied to this. It's really important. And that's something that we try to drive. A big benefit too, a lot of companies are trying to do the minimum. If you're a company that has a level 1 requirement, like we've had, we try to push them to that level 3. Then we send a notification letter to the prime. Hey, if you want to come down and check us before we get a C3PO in, we're level 3 ready. What we're seeing is that these companies are now getting extra contracts because Boeing, Lockheed, and some of these primes are saying, oh, you're ready already. I'm going to give you this extra work that I know is going to be level 3. So they're opening opportunities also for these small and medium companies that before they weren't. So they're smaller, they can make quicker decisions, they can be agile, they can adjust and implement some of these security parameters faster, which gives them a leverage against other large organizations. So the goal will be to get all these small, medium businesses, especially in Georgia and in this area, readied up so that they can get all those contracts and all that work and make our state have that workforce always employed.
That's fantastic. Let's go ahead.
Oh no, but yeah, I think it's interesting because I think I see two sides of the spectrum, and I think what Horacio said makes a lot of sense, because at the end of the day, do you want to not boil the ocean, kind of like Chris S said, which is do what you need to do, right, to get the contract. I get that part, right, and a lot of times compensating controls are good enough, right, to get you through those things. On the other hand, I've been in cyber long enough that we always get reminded, right, of how bad it is. And we thought everybody understood everything when Target got hacked, right, through HVAC, but they didn't, right? And so here comes, you know, arguably a company that's been around since the 90s, right, in SolarWinds. Maybe somebody was at CMMC 2, right, or whatever, and that was okay for their business, but they trusted this third party, right, that had been around for a long time, and it was the tip of the spear, right? And we all know what's happened. The onion's been peeled. Clearly, it was a targeted espionage attack, but this is an example of two sides of the spectrum. On one hand, I need one or two, and that's good enough for me. On the other hand, to Horacio's point, what's your end goal? Do I want to be secure so I manage myself from a breach or any targeted attack of the future? So, you know, you have to, I think, balance those two things. I think from a business standpoint, I fully appreciate that these certifications are there for a reason. And you know, to Chris's point, I think understand what you need and then work on that. But I also agree with being in cybersecurity that you have to be prepared and you have to understand your full risk, inherent risk posture, because I mean, you know, I live in the world right now where, you know, we are trying to understand the third-party risk, the inherent risk associated, because your attack surface is exponentially larger now. Nobody's really going after you anymore. They're going after who you do business with. And so I feel that, especially now, and a lot of the panelists probably have seen this, small businesses have been the wounded sheep. They've all pivoted in the pandemic now to go from storefront, on-prem to fully digital, right? Which has opened up their risk of attack. And now breaches are averaging 200,000, right? And these small businesses, to your point, Horacio, 500 endpoints, 30, 40 employees, they barely have an IT department, let alone a cybersecurity infrastructure. So what we're trying to do at MasterCard, we see that, and we're really focused on the small business, Georgia being one region or area, is to give them the tools to understand the risk first, right? What is it that you need to know about who you do business with, not just yourself, that is potentially at compromise? And we take an asset first approach, not a human approach, because at the end of the day, it's the assets, the shadow IT, right? These types of things that are usually your targeted exploit, a target of exploit. So we take this approach that says, really understand a prioritized asset risk-based approach to not only your own enterprise, but the 100 suppliers you work with. And then largely mapping that to all these different controls. So we even have a capability that maps to all the CMMC certifications. So you can know all the risks and map that to each level within CMMC and be able to fix those, right? Mitigate those and tell you, okay, these are the types of fixes. So, you know, I think it makes sense to scope what you need, but it also makes sense to really try to understand, how do I manage my inherent risk overall, right? So that I'm not gonna have these problems financially, or in the case of Horacio said, like life-threatening issues too, because when we're dealing with the government, we're talking about, you know, real implications here beyond just financial impact. So just kind of some thoughts I'm hearing from the other panelists.
Yeah, to follow on from that, you know, Roy, when you introduced us all today, you said it was about the journey of CMMC, and I think that's, you know, Ron, where you were heading with this is that, you know, maybe initially it's just getting to that initial level, right? Just you're complying, but there should be that aspirational component. What Horacio was saying around getting to that greater level of maturity, that level 3 and beyond over time. And I think that's really what the goal of the program is. I think that's where we'll see it go over the long haul. As we build momentum, we get more 3POWs certified and everything else, we'll see that maturity grow and the expectation for everyone to be at that higher level as we go. You know, some organizations can get there very quickly. If they're small enough, they have that agility. They don't maybe have that same issue of internal inertia or complexity around things. But you know, over time, it's going to take time for a lot of organizations to get there. But let's get them to that first level, wherever that may be, and then let's keep that journey going.
It's kind of like, I know Go ahead, Chris.
Well, so Roy, I know you have plenty of questions, but
No, I love this discussion.
I don't want to belabor this one, but I think, I mean, it's very good, great input. So Horacio, you and I'll arm wrestle later, but I want to make sure that everybody understands. I come from a security background, right? 23 years. But what I learned over the course of that is you have to temper that, when you're dealing with business leaders, because security is just one, element to them. In fact, it's an element of risk, right? There are other risk management and risk concerns outside of security. And then I look at compliance as sort of a subset of risk and security. So yes, Horacio, absolutely, if we were talking about protecting children from child predators, or our military, yes, I'm definitely on board with you with that. But at the same time, I don't think that compliance is the end all do all, especially for small businesses, because you've just got a couple dollars. And by the way, I don't consider like 500 endpoints as a small business, right? I'm, clients that I'm working with are more like, 20 endpoints. I mean, these are really small. I mean, if you want to call them micro businesses, that's fine. But they are in this environment, and kind of stuck to it. Right.
So 500 is what DoD sells. For me, 80% of our infrastructure are customers with 20 or less devices. So 80% of our customers. So that's where it is. And I agree. It's that security, and security. It's always a small attention, as you mentioned, on the board and on the business side. I get it, right, until the breach happens, and then it's the most important thing. And let's throw all the money at it, right? So how do we avoid it so that we don't get to that point? Right. That's kind of like part of this journey. So definitely.
So let me interrupt, and I'm going to ask a question, because somebody, I've heard this question before. So we're talking about small businesses, and in my world, a small business is $750 million or less, right? Okay. So potato on what the definition of small is. But and Ron kind of brought up this point of a lot of what you're talking about. Let's not talk about just strict, okay, we've got these things we've got to check the box on, but kind of this culture, knowing what your suppliers are doing, right? And so, SolarWinds or your other suppliers that provide systems to you that are integral to your business, but also to your security posture. What are you telling these small companies, that are trying to get CMMC certified, whether it's 1 or 3 or whatever, that they need to be thinking about with respect to their vendors? Even if the vendor doesn't deal with CUI coming from them, should they still be concerned? Should they still be asking the vendors to be, get to CMMC level 1? Kind of, what are your thoughts on that? And
so we usually tell them, if your product you're using ends in home edition, it's no longer going to be something that you'll be able to be using in your enterprise. I get it, it's the most affordable one, and it does the same things, but it's not going to collect the proper logs. It's probably it's going to miss some of the configurations. If you're using products like Google Drive or Dropbox, but you're using the personal, the home, or something that is not FedRAMP level, it's also not going to be able to use it. I get it. You've been doing business this way. Those are the tools that you were using. They're at the perfect price point for you. However, there are now requirements where that data is going to live and be stored that you need to meet. And really, that's one of the biggest challenges that we see, is walking in and answering the questions of, I've been in companies that had checked off the assessment, and my panelists here will probably love it because they've probably seen it many times. They've checked on the basic assessments for DFARS interim rule. Yes, we do have a firewall. When we go in and we start doing the work and we do a gap analysis, we say, well, where's the firewall? We didn't see it. Oh, it's on the router from Comcast that they provide. They have a firewall built into it. It's like, it
says firewall.
Exactly. So it's really not what we didn't, there's that education. But knowing what those solutions are that you need, it's really important. And a quick set off is that if it's meant for home or personal, you're really not going to mean it. You got to start really using business-driven tools. So I go ahead and I'll open it up for
well, I think I'll jump on that, Horacio. I think one of the things that you hit on right there, and you know, we have a capability that's focused on third-party risk management. If you look over the last decade or so, and even today, largely there's still these 100-page questionnaires, right? They exist, right? Here you go. Here's, you know, and a lot of companies we run into, they still are manually doing this, right? They're talking to their supplier. You know, you run an AV, are you running encryption? Or do you have the latest Magento? I mean, yes. Okay, pretty qualitative, right? And that ultimately is the rub. You can do all the questions and answers you want between your suppliers and vendors when you onboard, but if you truly don't know what they're operationally doing, you know, to the point where you have your tracking, and to your point, Roy, this is what we tell people, like, you need to be able to have demonstrated all the assets that you own across your supply chain are protected. And when I say that, I mean literally understanding everything from encryption to running PHP to running you know, the right level of email, you know, email exchange protocols and everything. That has to be done in a quantitative fashion. Otherwise, you really are just guessing. And, you know, we found like third-party analysts today, like one person can probably handle at most 10 suppliers. And that's typically a very manual process that is qualitative. So I think this is, you know, what we try to demonstrate is that understanding, again, that inherent risk in your supply chain, to your point, Roy, as you onboard vendors, because I think people are naturally, with the pandemic, and we'll see it post-pandemic, they are naturally just using subcontractors and vendors a lot more, right? It's just naturally happening. And I see breaches every day, right? We had the CITA breach with the airline industry. Acelion was another one, old school file transfer protocol that got hacked. You know, Microsoft. Okay, so, you know, the breaches are happening by way of the weakest links now.
Right.
And so really understanding the risk they bring to your organization. And I think the last thing I'll say to Chris S's point, I think we got to change the conversation that risk, you know, security isn't sexy. We all know that, right? We've said that before. It just doesn't seem sexy. But risk management actually can help you in your digital transformation. If you take the approach that's an optimization, as opposed to, oh, I have to do this and spend money on this, that has a different narrative, in my opinion.
Well, so I want to throw in a couple of things. First of all, small businesses definitely rely on third parties more than large businesses, right? I mean, that's just, and it's always been that way, right? I mean, you're a cookie baker, you know how to bake cookies, and that's what you know, and you don't have time to hire a security expert or even an IT expert. So you probably outsourced IT to, whether you started with your son or daughter doing the IT for you, and then finally got to the point where you needed to pay somebody, or, well, pay somebody. So I think small businesses have been dealing with this issue more so than large businesses for a long time, but of course, you know, haven't really been educated about it. What we are seeing from a breach standpoint and a incident response, because we do that as well, and especially for small businesses, is the push toward Office 365 has just exploded the opportunity for attackers for business email compromise, right? Password spraying, all that kind of stuff. And so to me, you know, this is great. This is one of the, I mean, PCI, you're okay. PCI didn't, you know, started to address the idea of vendor management and, you know, getting attestations of compliance for your processors or that type of thing, but they didn't really get the teeth in it like CMMC does, right? That whole flow down rule, it is truly something that's going to open some people's eyes, right? I mean, you know, like you said, Horacio, you know, when they engage a vendor, now they need to go through that process of, don't just tell me that you're compliant, show me that you're compliant. And we're going to have that in the contract that you are going to maintain this level of compliance with CMMC or whatever it might be, because I've got to, as a small business owner, I've got to create a responsibility matrix, and I got to point to which practices you're in charge of, which ones I'm in charge of, and which ones we're sharing, right? And it's, I mean, that is a big deal.
That's actually going to be, no, that's going to be one of the big challenges for smaller businesses also.
Yeah.
Is having the leverage to get their suppliers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Imagine if you're a small guy going to a big supplier for some widget, just getting them to even give you the time of day to answer those questions. Ron, you were talking earlier about the questionnaires that go out and the resulting clipboard army that goes along with that. I got questions, as a software vendor, we got questions after SolarWinds, and the quality of question ranged. If you ask someone the question, do you use SolarWinds? Well, no. As soon as CISA put out the advisory that said disable it, I could say no. But I got a follow-on question from someone else that said, in the last 16 months, have you used it? Well, now that's a very different question. The answer was still no, but it also comes down to what types of questions we're asking people. The nice thing about CMMC is that, it is a measurement of, demonstrating it, and it's continuous. Right there, it has requirements in there for continuous monitoring, continuously demonstrating that you're actually doing these things and building it in as part of your practices. That's a huge shift. Before, you could almost study for the exam, right? Hurry up and get the documentation together to show the auditor, hey, we passed. All right, everyone go back to what you were doing. We'll do this again in a year. You can't do that with this, and I think that's an important shift to get us away from people just trying to give the answer they think they're expected, because they're not going to be able to do that.
And I think maturity is part of the name, right? It's cyber maturity model certification, and a mature organization, that's what they're looking for and then that's what we tell our customers too. I mean, just because we can in 90 days be able to deploy firewalls, IPS, IDS, all the technical side, do policies, doesn't mean that you're mature. You're not going to be able to demonstrate that to a C3PAO. It's going to take time. You need to make sure that everybody lives and breathes the policies, that they understand it, that we're sending phishing campaigns to show and validate that, yes, our employees do get cybersecurity. They know of the threats that are out there. So it's going to take some time. It's not impossible. It will take time, but it can be done. It just needs to be organized. And yes, as everybody has said it here, these small organizations, they don't have sometimes that expertise. So knowing that your vendor understands the CMMC, maybe requiring your vendor to meet certain CMMC levels and asking them. I know CPA firms, and we work with some accountant firms that had themselves be CMMC level or just ready. They're maybe not, they're going to pay for it, but they're buying that solution from us because they want to be able to say, look, our networks understands you. We understand it, and we've taken the extra step of making that move. So this is going to really shift the market. And yes, a lot of companies won't be able to adjust to it and do that. But as somebody we have manufacturers, machine shops that they have plating companies. So they'll send the parts that they make to these plating companies. They're requiring some of those plating companies to, hey, I need you to be CMMC, or I need to go with another plating company. I'm sorry.
So I'm gonna pause this here for a second, gentlemen, because believe it or not, we're getting real close to the end here of our time before we go to Q&A. So here's the challenge for each of you. In 2 minutes or less, what should, let's say somebody is out there and they're starting the CMMC journey, or they're stuck and they're trying to, what should they be thinking about when trying to find somebody to help them? I'm looking for somebody to help me. What are the few things I ought to be thinking about? And so, Ron, I'll start with you, put you on the hot seat here, 2 minutes or less. Kind of what should they be thinking about? And, we can expand upon this a little bit more in the Q&A, but just for right now.
Sure. Yeah, I think, not sort of start off with what Chris S. said, but I think it is important to first understand the scope, right? Understand where you need to be, right? And there's two fronts. One is for my business, do I need to be 1, 2, or 3? What matters? The second thing is what level of risk can I manage or be comfortable with, right, in my own organization? And then that should be defined largely by your own enterprise and the number of suppliers you work with. So really understand what are my high risk vendors. We always put things in terms of high risk vendors, because just onboarding 1 or 2 people that maybe you have low touch point may not be enough to say, well, we need to really monitor the risk of that. So we try to put things in high risk vendor categories, and medium and large enterprises have different levels, right? Different numbers, but understand the vendors you work with and what represents high. That's the first thing. The second part I would say is that a lot of companies, whether you're small, medium, or large, back to the point of they don't really understand the risk that they have today. So they need to, I would say, look for providers and solutions, because there are some out there now. You don't have to manually do this anymore. That's the beauty. With Horacio, he works from 0 to 100. That's the beauty of this. Find those low lift tools and solutions that can provide an automated solution, right, to map CMMC to your current risk internally. We do that. We have a mechanism that maps 12 different controls, including CMMC, back to your risk. And that's a great way for them to identify those problems and then just sort of decide which one should I actually mitigate based on the business I need to be at. So this is typically what I would tell someone today, is that you don't have to do it alone. You don't have to do it manually. There are good solutions that out there that can identify the risk and map that to your CMMC needs. So this is kind of what I would tell organizations to be looking at.
Fantastic, great advice. Mr. Hellenbeck, Chris H.
So, it's that same thing, that initial inventory, deciding where you need to be, where you are currently. And part of that even comes down to just knowing what you have in your environment. Every organization I've gone and talked to, they can't honestly tell you all the systems that they have, what's installed on them, how they're configured in the most basic of senses. Do those foundational things first, or as that first step in this, and then find, as Ron and others have said, find those companies that can help you bring all of those pieces together. But you've got to be able to have that monitoring in place to know that basic inventory, and it has to be on an ongoing basis. Identify that when you're drifting. And that'll be part of that automation journey too. That greater level of maturity, when you can start to automate those things that you're doing. It shouldn't be a heavy lift. This should be something that you can start doing the work on and just gradually improve as you go. If it is a huge lift for you, take a step back and reconsider what you're working on. Gotcha.
Fantastic. Mr. Silvers, our only RP on the call and soon to be C3PAO. I kind of say it that way instead of CPAO. Because
right.
I'm a Star Wars fan, you know.
True, as am I. But I did want to give a shout out to Chris, because I hadn't heard 3PAO, and I like that.
I hadn't either.
It rolls off the tongue. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Doing the FedRAMP journey.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I love it. 3PAO. I like that. So, yeah, definitely. It sort of goes back to the whole, applicability. I would start with a business decision. Do you want to play in this space or not? Because for some companies, it may just not be worth it, right? I mean, it's all about business, right? Especially for a small business. And then second, as many people have alluded to, where do I find help? The CMMC-AB.org website. That is like my do all. I mean, I've got that tab open all the time, right? And in the accreditation body website, there's a marketplace. So you can go in the marketplace, you can search for different, RPOs, registered provider organizations, registered practitioners such as myself, C3POs, all that stuff. And I did want to mention also, because I meant to before, is that as a C3PAO, my company has to be compliant at level 3. So even though I'm not handling technically CUI, they're considering the report of the certification as CUI. So I'm going through the same process as these small businesses are. I am not CMMC certified right now. Are you kidding me?
Right.
So I've got to create an enclave and all that stuff. And honestly, that is the way to go. Create an enclave. Don't bring your entire business and your entire environment into scope, right? It's just going to be, it's just going to be too expensive, really, for most companies. And I get what Horacio is talking about, yes, get there from a security perspective, but this is business. This is real money that you're going to be missing until you get certified.
Gotcha. And the subject of your journey to get certified, that's the subject of another webinar, maybe.
Yeah.
So Horacio, close us out here. What would be your need looking for a provider?
Yeah, so Chris asked it, hit it right on the head. The CMMC-AB has a marketplace. There are other marketplaces out there. I know some companies have started their own marketplaces and stuff. Go to the source. Go to the CMMC-AB, filter out by state if you want to, or filter out however you want to do it, and you'll be able to identify those organizations. So we are an RPO organizations. We have multiple RPs that work with us. We're on our journey also to be CMMC Level 3 ready. As soon as we can get a C3PAO that's fully qualified to certified, then we'll be there. Right now, the CMMC-AB is struggling in getting that out there. So eventually it will be, but our journey and our processes. And then when you find out somebody that you can work with, somebody that really understands your market. So being in the manufacturing space is completely different than being an engineering company. In the manufacturing space, we do have customers that have to have Windows XP machines. And that's because the multi-million-dollar machines that laser cut these metals, they're not going to upgrade it just to add Windows 10 on it. I mean, it's a big investment. That machine is still in the ROI timeframe. So they haven't even finished paying it off. So how do you mitigate those risks? So it's somebody that really understands your industry. That's really important. Ask for references within that industry also. These RPs, these RPOs, these C3PAOs, these companies. Find out that they have worked with your industry, and references that you can call another expert like you and another other business owner and ask, hey, how was it? Is the guy good to work with? Did they really understand? Or did you have to, other than hiring him to do your assessment and help you in cyber, now you also have to train him on what manufacturing is? So it's really important that they understand. And once you do that, gap assessments. I'm sorry, Chris was correct. Identify first if the clauses are in your contract. If you have a 7012 or 7019 DFARS clauses, or 7020, 7021, now you know you're, so you have 7021, you have CMMC. If you have the other ones, then you have NIST 800-171. So now you know that you are handling CUI. So now we need to start looking at what do we do properly, right? And then go to the gap assessment. So first of all, just find out somebody that can really advise you, help you in the journey, and that understands your industry. It's really important. We have some industries that we don't work with just because we don't, I'm sorry, I mean, we don't understand it, and we're not going to be much effect. You're going to have to train us first. And I'm pretty sure that you want to move quicker than that. So. Gotcha.
All right, gentlemen, fantastic advice. I love it. I really do appreciate your candor. And as we turn to Q&A, I look forward to hearing your answers to some of the questions from our listeners today. Again, thank you so much, and appreciate you being a part of this panel and the Q&A.
Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, again, thank you so much for participating today, and just great discussion. We had a panel earlier today, which was actually companies that are in the trenches on their CMMC journey. And it's amazing how much was the same as, the level of discussion, and quite frankly, kind of the same steps that the journeys are taking, whether it's within the panel of providers or whether it's within actual companies that are on their CMMC journey. One thing that I do, excuse me, look at, and I noticed Zach is here. Horacio had to run today to another meeting, so Zach has joined us. Chris, there you are. So one question, and I didn't say Chris S or Chris H, but one question I did want to ask you all that we really didn't talk about, and I would consider it to be the elephant in the room, and that is the Colonial Pipelines ransomware attack. And really where I want to go with it and get your thoughts is when you talk to your customers, customers that are trying to get CMMC certified and that sort of thing, one of the things that they always talk about is what do I do? Is it a moving target? There is DFARS, there's NIST, there's CMMC now. And over, the last few days, the President Biden issued an executive order. And so some of the chatter that I'm hearing involves the question of, okay, now we've got this presidential order. If I'm a small business, am I going to have to do something else now? Is CMMC going to be the end of the journey, or am I going to spend the money on CMMC and now have to do something else because of this presidential order and a heightened level of scrutiny around these things from the federal government? So, Chris S., I'll turn to you first, and just what are you telling your customers? What are you telling your clients around this new presidential order and CMMC and what that all means for them?
Right. Well, that's a great question. And there's, to be honest, I have not taken really a deep dive into the executive order at this point. Kind of the highlights, to me, the most encouraging thing that I see out of this is the same thing that's happening in the CMMC ecosystem already. Is the threat information sharing between government and private sector, right? This has been something that's been, it started back with the FBI InfraGard, and I was a member way back when, and you had to install the VPN software, and it was just really complicated, and it was just clunky. And so, I mean, right now on one of my screens, I keep up a Discord channel of C3PAO folks. And I want to say that there's over 100 of us on this Discord channel, and there's just so much more collaboration. I'll guarantee you the bad guys are collaborating. Right. So regardless of whether, whatever, you need to collaborate with other businesses that are just in the same situation. And so I hope, my hope is that maybe CMMC will be expanded to critical infrastructure, right? Because right now it doesn't really directly impact critical infrastructure unless that, critical infrastructure company has a DoD contract, right? So, the hope is that maybe CMMC can be the answer to those things.
Okay, great. Hey, Chris H., quick question for you. I know in the discussion earlier, we talked about questionnaires, and I think Ron really talked about questionnaires. Do you think that questionnaires are useful, or do they give us a false sense of security? And Zach, I'm going to ask you the same question.
I think absent other means of gathering this information and gaining a sense of the security posture of your suppliers, that's about the state of the art for many organizations. So it's a matter of what's available, what's reasonable for them to do. If you think about it, a questionnaire is something that can be sent off to an organization. They can answer it on their own time within a given time frame and send it back. Whereas if it all is sending people on site to manually interview people and do other things, there's a lot more involved. So it serves a purpose. It's far from ideal. There's a lot that goes wrong with it, and I think it does give a false sense of security because it's usually done no more than once a year.
Right.
And as we discussed earlier on, it's some of it's in the art of the question being asked, and there's a whole other art in answering these questions in a way that doesn't answer anything at all. So there's different ways of gaming it that ends up giving you a false sense of things too. So some of it comes down to maybe you do questionnaires for some of your vendors that you already have a good feeling that they're handling things. So you put everyone through the same process.
Right.
And then there's others where either they're really consequential vendors or they're the ones that come back with weak answers that you spend more time with them in a more manual process.
Okay. Great advice. Zach, thoughts?
Yeah, Chris hit some really good points there. I think that the questionnaires can be dangerous, right? So data is only always going to be as good as the source that you get it from. Through our process, what we really like to do is we put sensors out. We use technology to do the scans. Again, if your provider has that available, that's great. But what you're going to get is you're going to get more timely results. You're also going to get more accurate results because it's based off of the flow of the data, how the systems themselves are configured. But I also think it's going to save you some costs because, again, less time is going to equal less costs on site. So it's important that that organizations use as much of the technology that the RPOs, everyone else out there, that they can. You do have to go the manual route, like for example, physical security. There's no scanner out there on the market that can tell me if you have the proper lock on your door or if your safe that has your physical CUI equipment or paperwork in there is sitting in your lobby wide open, unlocked, so
or if your visitor log at the front desk has the necessary column to ask if they're US citizens or not.
Exactly. So we as CSS, we ask the physical security questions. There's some that you can't get around. But for all of the things that we can do remotely or through technology, we try to do that because of the accuracy that you get in those results.
Exactly. Data driven is just going to be far more timely and accurate. And if you instrument correctly, you can be doing this at any given time. So if the government did change their mind and decide that they want to do annual plus randomized ones throughout the year, it's no different for you. So the more automated you can be in this, the better off you're going to be in the long run. Roy, back to the first question that you had posed around, with the EO, what's likely to change, what's not. One of the things people don't understand about executive orders is there's a lot of sausage making that it goes on, but well before that EO ever comes out.
Right.
The national security staff in the White House are personnel that are assigned from all the different agencies in the federal government. So they're already putting their heads together and deconflicting what the efforts are between the different agencies. So it's very unlikely that what comes out in an EO is going to conflict with some of the efforts of a major branch of government like the DoD. If anything, it's going to build upon some of the work that they've already done. So that's what I would see happening here. There is legislation that is being put forward that actually came out as a part of SolarWinds, and then it has now picked up more steam and more bipartisan support because of the Colonial Pipeline attack. So if anything, I think we'll see a combination of EO as well as potentially some legislation that comes out. Legislation will be mostly on the breach notification side. And then they're going to more carefully consider what type of regulatory things come into play as well.
And Roy, just a 20-second add to that. I think the most important piece when looking at this Colonial Pipeline and all these other breaches that have happened, we touched on it earlier. I can't remember who said it, but someone said, don't focus solely on compliance, focus on security and making sure that. It was Chris. There you go. He's waving his hand. Chris S. So
Yeah.
I think the most important part is if you put proper security in the proper tools and you train your staff, you have the policies and procedures, everything that the compliance does require, you're going to meet all these other compliance areas as well. So I think that's the biggest thing to focus on is finding a team or multiple teams that you pull together that can provide you that full scope of a proper security program.
Mm-hmm. And Ron, the question was just, really given the executive order and Colonial Pipeline, what are you telling people? What are you telling your customers, your clients that they need to focus on? Is there anything in that executive order that causes concerns, or is it encouraging for you, or just some general thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, it's interesting, and I just want to kind of comment quickly on the questionnaire thing. I think I agree with everybody's comments there that it comes back to people, time, and money ultimately. And if you think about the questionnaire, it doesn't really move the needle in all three of those. And an automated approach that actually validates the questionnaire as a framework is really the right way to go, because you need to quantify these things. So I just wanted to wrap that one up.
Right.
I think the interesting part to me that I saw on it, and I'm still deducing a lot of that, right, as others mentioned here.
You mean you didn't digest the whole 34 pages?
No. The nice thing is we got people that will summarize stuff in the company
Right.
for us really nicely and go, hey, this is what it means for us.
It's good to have people.
Yeah, software supply chain. I think this is really, a lot of it is really interesting. Really trying to continue to partner the private sector with government. I can see that's a big part of the executive order, right? We need to do more of this. Not just on the heels of SolarWinds, when FireEye gets involved and Microsoft gets involved, and now there's all this sort of after the fact work to happen. But before these happen, we should be working much more in conjunction with government, right, and private sector. So that's a big part, I think, ingrained in that order. But we've seen arguably 400% increase in next generation software supply chain attacks in the last 3 to 4 years. And that's largely because of open source code that is not qualified, right? And unless you're really doing it internally with software design practices built in, you may end up with code that's vulnerable, right? And you don't know where that's coming from. So one of the parts of the order is really focusing on software supply chain and hardware, of course. So, and I think when you think about the colonial hack, right, as much as there was a big fee associated with it, a lot of this comes back to these vulnerabilities that you get from off-the-shelf software, right? And I think that part of it and some of the hardening that we're going to do with respect to supply chain and how we ensure integrity, right, of the code, I think is going to be very relevant, right? Because ultimately, this is what we're dealing with.
All right, gentlemen, I'm getting the hook here, so I will close us out. I really do appreciate the candor, the forthrightness that you all gave to this discussion. A lot of great information, and kind of as Ron said, we have to share information more because the bad actors are doing it every day. They are sharing, how to do it, where to do it, why did, all of that. And so we have to do a much better job. We've been talking about it for a while. We have to do it. And so thank you so much for, again, your willingness to just kind of throw it out there and talk about these sorts of things. So on behalf of, the CMMC Task Force and the Georgia Department of Economic Development and TAG and the Cyber Center and all of the other partners that are involved in this, thank you so much for participating today, and be safe. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you for joining today's session with the Georgia Defense Industrial Base Task Force. I'm Cassia Baker with the Center of Innovation for Aerospace at the Georgia Department of Economic Development. I'm the project manager for OLDCC grant initiatives. We'd like your help completing a survey. Your responses will be used to develop additional resources. And as a thank you for completing the survey, we'll send you Mark Lupo's slide deck, our Level 1 workbook, and links to all of our resources. If you're ready to advance now, we have a short-term grant opportunity to help companies move toward interim rule requirements and build a roadmap towards CMMC. Additional information will be posted on the Georgia Defense Industrial Base Task Force landing page, as well as our Cybersecurity Edge landing page. Again, thank you for joining us today.